What you are about to hear is going to make a lot of you absolutely furious. Not because it's a lie, because it's the truth, and the truth hurts more than any steel chair ever could. Paul Heyman, the greatest mind in the history of professional wrestling, the man who built ECW from the ground up, the visionary who took a young, unpolished Roman Reigns and transformed him into the most dominant world champion of the modern era. The wise man, the special counsel, the last piece of a puzzle that made WWE television must-see for 4 straight years, has been written off television. And what's worse, there are people inside WWE who are perfectly okay with that. Let that sink in. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why this happened, what it really means for WWE, and whether Paul Heyman will ever return to our screens. I'm your host, and this is WrestleScope. Let's get into it. Let's go back to where it all began to unravel. For the better part of 4 years, Paul Heyman was the heartbeat of SmackDown. Every time that music hit and Roman walked to that ring with Heyman 3 steps behind him, you knew something iconic was about to happen. Heyman didn't just manage Roman, he elevated him. He gave Roman the vocabulary, the gravitas, the aura that turned him from a guy the fans were trying to boo into someone they couldn't help but respect. But something shifted. The bloodline, once the most compelling faction in wrestling, started to crack. Sami Zayn's integration, Jey Uso's betrayal, the Solo Sikoa takeover storyline, brilliant in concept, but slowly, quietly, Paul Heyman began to be pushed to the margins. His role shrunk, his mic time dried up. The man who used to open shows with 15-minute masterclasses in verbal storytelling was becoming background noise. And then came the moment that shocked the entire WWE universe. Paul Heyman, written off television in a storyline that had him essentially discarded by the very man he helped create. The optics alone were devastating. But here's what nobody is talking about. The writing off wasn't just a storyline decision. There were real creative forces behind it. And the story behind the story is far more explosive than anything you saw on screen. Now, let me be clear. The official line from WWE is that this is simply a creative direction, that the Bloodline story needs to evolve, that Paul Heyman stepping back is part of a long-term plan. Fine, okay, I'll play along with that narrative for a second. But let's think critically. Paul Heyman is arguably the most important non-wrestler in WWE history, not just a mouthpiece, a creative architect. The man who pitched the idea of Roman Reigns as the tribal chief, the man who co-wrote some of the most compelling television WWE has produced in decades. You don't just write that person off without a reason. You don't bench your greatest weapon because the story needed it. Here's where it gets interesting. Reports have circulated, and we've been tracking this closely, that there are creative differences between Heyman's vision for the Bloodline's next chapter and the direction that WWE's current writing team wants to take. Paul Heyman is not a man who simply executes someone else's script. He's a collaborator, a creative force, and when your vision clashes with the machine, sometimes the machine wins. Now, I'm not saying there's a blow-up behind the scenes. I'm not saying Paul Heyman is about to walk out. What I am saying is that writing Paul Heyman off TV without a major return plan in place is one of the most baffling creative decisions WWE has made in years. And if you disagree with me, comment below right now and tell me why, because I genuinely want to hear the other side of this. Let's talk numbers for a second, because this is where the argument becomes undeniable. The period from 2020 through the height of the Bloodline storyline was one of WWE's most critically acclaimed and commercially successful creative runs in the modern era. SmackDown was consistently outperforming Raw in the ratings. The Roman Reigns tribal chief character was generating mainstream attention WWE hadn't seen in years, and Paul Heyman was the architect of that entire world. Think about what Heyman brings to a segment. It's not just the words, it's the layers. Every Heyman promo is a chess match. He plants seeds 3 months in advance. He references history most writers have forgotten. He knows how to make the audience feel what they want them to feel at exactly the right moment. That is a gift that cannot be scripted into existence. You can't just replace Paul Heyman with a staff writer and expect the same product. And yet, that is essentially what WWE is attempting to do right now. And the result? Roman Reigns feels diminished without him. Solo Sikoa's group, despite some genuinely solid work, lacks the verbal firepower that made the original Bloodline so hypnotic. There is a hole in WWE television right now, and it is shaped exactly like Paul Heyman. Here's the part of this video where I'm going to throw a wrench into everything I just said, because this is WrestleScope, and we don't just tell you what's happening. We ask the questions nobody else is asking. What if Paul Heyman's removal from television is the greatest long con in WWE history? Think about it.
Paul Heyman is a genius at professional wrestling storytelling. Roman Reigns is returning at some point. That is not a question of if, but when. And what would be more powerful, more electric, more worth the price of admission than the moment Paul Heyman walks back out and stands behind the tribal chief once more? Or, and this is the scenario that keeps me up at night, what if Heyman's return isn't in service of Roman Reigns, but as the architect of Roman's downfall? Imagine the story. Heyman, humiliated and discarded, aligns himself with a new superstar, someone who has the potential to not just challenge Roman, but to destroy the tribal chief mythology from the inside. A heel Heyman pulling strings in the shadows. A WrestleMania confrontation between creator and creation, the wise man versus the head of the table, the mentor versus the monster he made. That would be the greatest storyline WWE has ever told, and it starts right now, with Paul Heyman being written off TV. Or, and I acknowledge the starker possibility, this is just a genuine creative miscalculation that WWE will quietly course correct in 6 months when the ratings tell the story. Either way, we're at a crossroads, and what happens next will define the next 3 years of WWE storytelling. Let's take a step back for a moment and appreciate what we're actually dealing with here, because some of the younger members of our audience might not fully understand the magnitude of what Paul Heyman means to professional wrestling. This is the man who ran ECW, Extreme Championship Wrestling, a promotion so raw, so innovative, so ahead of its time that it fundamentally changed the way professional wrestling was presented in America. Without ECW, there is no Attitude Era. Without the Attitude Era, WWE doesn't survive the Monday Night Wars. You can draw a direct line from Paul Heyman's creative vision in a bingo hall in Philadelphia to WWE becoming a billion-dollar publicly traded company. He then took Brock Lesnar, a former NCAA Division I wrestling champion with limited promo ability, and made him the most feared, most compelling monster in WWE history. He took CM Punk and elevated him into one of the most important WWE championship reigns in the modern era. And then he performed perhaps the greatest act of creative resurrection in wrestling history, taking Roman Reigns, a guy the fans had actively rejected for years, and within 6 months of the tribal chief turn, had that same audience on the edge of their seats every single week. That is Paul Heyman's resume. That is what is now sitting on the shelf. And WWE better have a plan to put him back to work, because the product needs him more than he needs the product. So here's where I leave it with you. Paul Heyman is off television. The greatest creative mind in professional wrestling is sitting on the sidelines. Whether this is a brilliant long-con masterpiece or the most inexplicable decision WWE's creative team has ever made, we are all going to find out very soon. But I want to hear from you. Drop a comment right now and tell me, is Paul Heyman's absence a calculated masterstroke that ends with the most explosive return in WWE history? Or is this a genuine creative disaster that WWE will regret? Comment Wise Man Returns if you think this is all a plan, and comment WWE Fumbled if you think they've just made the biggest mistake of 2024. I'm reading every single one. If this video opened your eyes, if you learned something, if it got you fired up, smash that like button right now. Seriously, hit it like Solo Sikoa hits a spike. It takes 2 seconds and it means the world to this channel. And if you are not already subscribed to WrestleScope, what are you doing? Every single week we're bringing you the deepest dives, the hottest takes, and the stories WWE doesn't want you to think too hard about. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a video. This has been WrestleScope. I'm your host. And remember, in this business, nobody is ever truly gone. They're just waiting for the right moment. Acknowledge him.